Risotto has a reputation of being a really difficult dish to cook, but it's all about timing, knowing when to add the ingredients, and determining doneness. Let's talk about our mise en place. So mise en place basically in French means everything in its place. You should have some Arborio rice. So this is the risotto rice we're gonna cook with today. Broth, so this is a veg bouillon broth. And if you haven't already, you're gonna heat up 8 cups of water and then stir this in. There's a nice chunk of Parmesan Reggiano. So this is the real stuff. It really comes from the Parma region. And we're gonna grate a cup of it or more if you want more. We have an onion, a lemon for a little bit of finishing at the end, some garlic, thyme that we're gonna saute in with our onions and garlic, and some dried porcini mushrooms. So you're gonna need 2 pots, one to make risotto, so about a 4-quart saucepan. So about this size. You want something with tall sides because we're gonna be doing a lot of stirring. And then another 4-quart saucepan that you've heated your broth in. The first thing I wanna do with you guys today is to teach you how to dice an onion. So there's 2 ends to an onion. There is the root end. So this was in the ground, there was roots in here. And then there's the stem end. And that stem is where the green shoots out from the ground. So we're gonna cut off the stem end and then we're gonna kind of stand it up. So I always try to cut things so that they're flat on my cutting board so they're not rolling around as I'm trying to cut them. And then we're gonna peel off all of this yellow skin. And we're just gonna make really nice fine slices. We want the onions to be as small as the grains of rice or smaller, because basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna cook these onions for a long time, low and slow, and then they're gonna kind of disappear into the risotto. And then I'm gonna cut this in half. If you feel comfortable, you can do that. And the reason I'm doing that is because I wanna have my onions nice and small. So I'm gonna turn my stove on to kind of a medium heat. I'm then gonna add in a couple tablespoons of olive oil. And I'm also gonna add about 2 tablespoons of butter. So the recipe calls for 4 tablespoons. We're gonna add 2 in the beginning, and then we're gonna add the other 2 tablespoons of butter at the end of this recipe. You want the onions to be kind of sizzling and talking to you, but you don't want them browning. So if they're starting to brown, we're gonna turn the pan down. If you don't hear them, if they're not making any noise or talking to you, you wanna turn your pan up a little bit. And we're gonna cook these for about almost 20 minutes. So my oil and butter is all melted, and now I'm gonna throw the onions in. You want to make sure there's enough fat in your pan so that they can cook. The fat is kind of your medium to help cook these onions, and if you don't have enough fat, they're going to kind of stick to the bottom of the pan and burn. So these are dried porcini mushrooms. Porcinis are a wild mushroom, so they have a very short window that they come up on the forest floor in the fall. We're going to soak these in some cold water. So grab a bowl and about a cup of cold water. Now, we're gonna just put these in like a little bath. We should also have our veg stock. If you haven't already, again, we need to have 8 cups of water in a pan. We'll heat it up to, when it comes to up to a boil, and then you'll add in your veg bouillon. And so I'm gonna turn this back on. We wanna have this nice and hot when we start adding this to our risotto. What do your onions taste like right now? Guess what? Kind of tastes like a raw onion. So we're gonna cook these for a lot longer. I can hear them sizzling away, and we're gonna cook them low and slow, and we're really gonna kind of tease out the sweetness of this onion to give us a nice base flavor for the risotto. I'm gonna add a little bit of salt to these onions. I really like to, when I'm cooking anything, I like to build flavor. I don't like to wait to the very end to add my salt. All right, let's check these onions again. Okay, so my onions are really soft now. If your onions are soft, which means they don't really have a crunch left in them, then we are ready to kind of move along to the next process. So the next steps are gonna go kind of quickly. So from here, we're gonna add in our garlic and our thyme. Again, if you don't like garlic, you can always omit this. And we're gonna add this in, and we're gonna cook it for a minute or 2. Basically, we're gonna cook it long enough until you can smell the garlic. We don't wanna brown the garlic or burn the garlic. We just wanna kind of toast it off, and you're gonna get the aroma of the garlic. This was 2 cloves of garlic. My cloves of garlic were pretty big, about a tablespoon of thyme. We're gonna stir that in, and I'm just gonna kind of keep stirring this. you'll start smelling it pretty quickly. I can smell the garlic, I can smell the thyme. So this is 2 cups of arborio rice. We're gonna throw it, all of it in the pan, and then we're gonna start stirring it. We're gonna toast it. And we're just gonna do this for about a minute, just to make sure all the grains of rice are nice and coated. We don't want any color on this, but we just want them to be tossed in this nice sofrito mixture. So if there's any onions or risotto stuck to the sides of the pan, kind of push them back down in with the rest of the mixture. So now I'm gonna add white wine. I'm gonna add about 1/2 cup. If you don't have white wine, then just skip this. I don't really measure it, but about 1/2 cup. And then we're gonna cook the wine until it's completely absorbed and it's disappeared. So there should be no more wine at the bottom of your pan. This is a really rich dish. So we've got butter and we're gonna have cheese in here and we have this cream risotto. And what the wine does is the acidity kind of balances that flavor. So white or rosé is fine. Probably don't wanna do red because it's just gonna change the color of our risotto altogether. Now we are ready to add the veg broth. And so much like we cooked the wine till it was completely absorbed, that's the same thing we're gonna do with their veg stock. In the ideal world of Italians, you would be adding your broth in 3 additions. We're gonna add our broth in about 3 to 5 additions. We're gonna add enough broth so that it completely covers your rice. I have the onions, garlic, thyme, risotto, wine, and my first addition of broth in the pan. And now we're gonna do a lot of stirring. So hopefully everybody brought their strong arm today because this is when we are gonna just stir and stir and stir and stir. The most important thing right now is to make sure that the risotto doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan because you don't want the risotto to burn and that can just ruin your entire dish. Unlike the caramelized onions, which won't ruin your dish, burning risotto could ruin this whole dish at this point. So there's no liquid left, it's just risotto. And I'm gonna go ahead and add the next addition of broth. So I'm gonna probably add a little bit more next time. And once I do that, I'm gonna go back to these wild mushrooms. So these mushrooms, they're nice and soft, they're nice and hydrated. We're gonna go ahead and strain them off. Wild mushrooms tend to grow on the forest floor. They can be really sandy and gritty, and you can ruin an entire dish by not having them clean. So I'm gonna go ahead and just run these to the sink really quickly and give them a nice rinse to make sure there's no grit left to them. So I'm just gonna strain this through a coffee filter. And then once that's strained, I'm gonna add that to my broth. So we're cooking this kind of at a medium temperature. I see some boiling going on. I can see bubbles, I can kind of hear it. So it's really an active cooking process. So if it's not kind of bubbling and boiling, you want to turn the heat up. But if it's too hot, you're going to kind of lose control. I have my heat in about medium right now. I think that's kind of a good way to go. And so wherever you're at in the process, just remember that you want to add your stock in additions, not all at once. Once it's all absorbed, then you can add your next addition, covering the rice fully by your stock. And then you kind of go from there. And you keep doing that. The trick with risotto is knowing the proper doneness. So this is a great time just to give this a taste. I said we're going to do a lot of tasting. So I'm on my second edition of broth. And we've probably been cooking this maybe 10 minutes. It's not raw rice, but it's definitely not cooked. So we've got some more cooking to do. And now that this mushroom broth is strained, I'm gonna add this to the back. So if you haven't done that yet, make sure you add the mushroom broth to your pot of veg broth because this is gonna add some really nice mushroom flavor and really enhance this dish. All of the liquid is absorbed from this pot. It's now kind of like an oatmeal, so there's no soupiness left. So towards the end, it's good to add this in a little at a time because this is when you're gonna have the most control over determining doneness. This is when I like to kind of taste it a bunch because I want to just kind of figure out where I'm at because the broth has been absorbed, not fully absorbed, but I still have I probably have 2 cups of broth back there. I've still got some cooking to do. But the other thing I'm tasting right now is flavor. So do I need to add any more salt to this? And I am not going to add any more salt. This broth is kind of salty, and then we're also adding parmesan at the end, which is pretty salty. So you don't want to make this too salty. So I think the salt that we added in the very beginning with the onions is going to be enough. I'm going to go ahead, because this is getting pretty close, and add in our wild mushrooms. It's not fully cooked, but I've added 3 additions of stock. I'm probably going to have to add a little bit more. And then once I stir that in, I'm going to taste this again. So I can tell by looking at this risotto, the risotto is now starting to become opaque, and I know that I'm getting pretty close. I'm going to taste this, and I'm going to show you my risotto, and I have about a cup of stock left. This risotto is very close. It's still creamy, so I'm going to add a little bit more stock, and I'm going to say that's going to be enough. I probably have, this is how much stock I have left. I have about a half a cup of stock left. Risotto should always have a little bit of creaminess and brothiness to it, and traditionally it's always served on a plate and not a bowl. Once you are at a point where you think it's cooked, so for me, the grains are translucent, it's not getting stuck in my teeth anymore, it's nice and creamy. Now we kind of adjust the seasoning at the very end. We are going to add lemon zest. Zesting a lemon just means that we're going to take the outside rind off. So I like to use a microplane. If you don't have a microplane, you can always use like a box grater, and we're just going to zest it. This is the most kind of intense flavor of the lemon that you can get. So I zested all the lemon. Now I really like the acid, the balancing of the acid to the end of the risotto, because it's a really rich dish. So I'm going to add in all the lemon zest. So I zested 1 lemon and threw it in there. Now I'm going to warn you guys about adding the lemon juice. So if you've added white wine, you probably don't want to add the juice of 1 lemon. I would actually encourage you just to add about a tablespoon of lemon juice and taste it and see how you like it. So only do this if your risotto is fully cooked, and this is kind of adjusting the seasoning at the end. So I'm happy with that amount of lemon juice. And then I'm going to add in, this is about a cup of Parmesan. If you love Parmesan, you can throw more in. You can't ever really have too much Parmesan in risotto, as far as I'm concerned. And then remember those 2 tablespoons of butter we didn't use in the beginning? Now we're going to throw them in. And what this is going to do, it's going to make your dish nice and rich and creamy, but it's also going to kind of give the risotto this nice sheen. And it's just going to make it give it this glossy look. So here's the thing about risotto. If you're gonna make this, you kind of want to serve it as soon as it's done, because it's going to sit, and this pan is so hot. You've built up so much heat by all this cooking. It's going to keep cooking and keep absorbing the liquid. So I'm going to get a plate and kind of show you what this should look like. And even though I told you that Italians would never eat this in a bowl, if you want to eat risotto in a bowl, that's fine. So we've got some risotto. I like to put a little bit extra Parmesan cheese on top of it, because there's no such thing as too much cheese. The other thing you could do at the end is, if you had truffle oil or truffle salt to really enhance the mushroom flavor, that would be great additions to this dish.